As business owners begin to assess getting out of the business, the first thing they have to wrestle with is, who am I? What does it mean for me as an individual if I'm not the leader of this business? And that holds a lot of owners back from even getting into the conversation of selling their business. And we think that's a bit of a shame, because you can have a very illustrious life beyond being the CEO or owner of this business. So on this podcast, I want to have a conversation directly to business owners to help them process how to build a life beyond the business after the sale.
It starts with questioning not who am I, but who could I be, right? What have I missed out on or would like to experience? And I think until you can create kind of the after vision, the afterlife, the after the post CEO, it's hard to give up all of that success or that creation, right? Because you're looking around and it's dark and murky and there's nothing there. So I would say starting with looking at those things that you've either had to give up during the journey or would like to experience, and putting those out there as this kind of the starter block.
Yeah, and even from a practical standpoint, business owners feel like they're needed. There's a sense of people need me, my team needs me, and my employees need me. How do they continue on being needed in a post-sale?
Yeah, Bert and I were just talking about that, because there's some elements of, identifying what can I do versus what can I, either hire somebody to do, train somebody to do, find a vendor to do. And then what am I getting out of what I do in terms of validation, of being the CEO, of being the person who's needed, of having that importance within a pond that you kind of controlled the perimeter around. And so that point around being needed, I think for owners, it's an introspective sort of exercise, right? To say, what am I really getting out of that? And are there other areas of my life that maybe I'd like to turn my focus back to get more of that? And I think for a lot of owners, that is a fluid type of thing and conversation with themselves that they are having. I'd say it's probably rare for it to be triggered by one big event, although sometimes that's the case.
I liked when we were getting to it, because it reminded me the conversation I had when I was selling my business and trying to going through this exact same thing. And I created this goal to sit on the board of 5 other businesses to fulfill. I wanted to be needed, but in a different needed way, not in a I'm running my own company way, but being involved in companies, being able to use those skills and experience. And that was a critical component. You spend all your time working. Everything you know is right there. Thinking about leaving it seems horrible, right? I'm gonna leave all my friends and everything I know and everything I do. What am I gonna do? Type of thing. So, and not having any friends. You talk to a typical CEO, ask them how many friends they have that they don't work with, that aren't in their industry. It's gonna get pretty quiet. It's going to turn to crickets a little bit, because you haven't had that extra time to develop those relations. Maybe everyone you went to university with, but other than that,
well, it's lonely at the top.
I think it's what you said, where it's this process, but probably the first step is separating. Like, I am not the business, so kind of not what's the opposite of absorbing, like distancing yourself a little bit, like I'm
detach a little bit,
right? I'm
detach.
Creating a business, and what decisions are best for the business that I am creating versus I am this business. And I think with that, just that little inch of space, then owners, CEOs, it begins to happen naturally, because you're just listening in a different way. When somebody's talking, you're like, oh, this person could be really good to lead the company sales meeting, which takes stress off of my current sales manager, which maybe allows him to sell more so that I'm not selling as much. You start to see these avenues of ways that you can delegate, where you can promote people from within, give them professional growth opportunities that are really a win-win, because effectively what you're doing is a very slow burn transition away from the activities that aren't as fulfilling to you, or from the activities that you are currently doing, but maybe you doing them isn't actually what's good for the business. Maybe the business would be better served by somebody else or a different process.
Yeah, identifying your strengths, what you really bring to the business, how would you replace that? You know, who could fill is that one person? Maybe it's multiple people to truly replace you. But it is a process, I think, of creating the destination and then going, now that you have that destination and that profile and the roles and responsibilities and the contribution, and then from that filter, look internally at your team and go, is anyone here capable of growing into that position, or is it something I need to do externally? But so it's not just promoting long-standing employees because they've been around for a long, and you're loyal to them and you like them, but they'll be completely unqualified. They're going to fail, likely. The company will fail, and so you won't have done anything that was helpful for you, the company, the legacy of the company, or them, by promoting them into a role that they're not qualified for. So
I think when change happens dramatically, which is more likely to happen if you don't intentionally plan for change, it can be dramatic. Say, for example, you're a company that's running on a cash-based accounting, and you're really riding high on the high times, but you don't have a great sense of like cash burn. Suddenly you're bankrupt when things slow down a little bit. And those sorts of situations, it can be very traumatic, because suddenly not only are you not the CEO, but instead of a success story, like the company is effectively crashed and burned. And so those sorts of times, I don't think the CEOs who are really thinking thoughtfully about transition, who are, you know, talking in their peer groups with EO or YPO or whatever it may be with an advisor around what their plans are, I don't see a lot of like regret, or I see a lot of, I want to start another business, because that act of creation for founders is sort of inherent to their personality.
Because they didn't have a plan, really. They go back and do what they know how to do, but they miss the opportunity, right? They miss the opportunity to go try something different because they never even distinguished what they wanted to try. But I do think there is an opportunity to struggle, because you are taking something you've done, you spent three-quarters of your waking hours doing one thing, and all of a sudden you don't have it. If you haven't filled that in with practices, how you're going to fill that time, getting up, exercising in the morning, spending quality time with the people you love, developing relationships, maybe you need to be a part of this club, giving back, which I think is another thing that gets lost a lot, like the true level of satisfaction, right, at the end of your life or at the end of your journey. It's not everything you've gathered, it's who else you've lifted up, who you've given to, the people that look to you, and you made that big difference, looking for opportunities there. And if you miss that and then you just go back to doing what you're doing for longer, you know, that's sad, I think, which is why you need that plan, you need that vision of what are those other things, right?
But maybe the plan also is to start another business, because a lot of entrepreneurs, they're like athletes, like they want, this is their sport.
Or nonprofit.
Sure. Yeah, or another organization.
Or they're like Shaq, as you said, you know, where they had all these other things they wanted to do as well, right?
Yeah.
They were excellent, and then they were like, but I also want to do all of these things, right? And create the after.
But I think what you're saying is it's the intentionality,
Definitely.
having the intentionality of what do I want to do after this, whatever it is.
Exactly.
Just being aware of it and not kind of being compelled, something that we talk a lot about for a lot of entrepreneurs, the drive to create wealth both for themselves and on behalf of their employees. A lot of it relates to how they grew up, and if they grew up without, or if they grew up with a lot and are now trying to eclipse whatever their dad or their grandfather did. And so kind of detaching, what is it really I want to create? Am I solving for something that was solved a long time ago, and I can let it go now and decide to do something else, knowing that it's going to be okay? Or is this really just like what I love to do? In which case, maybe I should keep doing it. Entrepreneurs who are very achievement-oriented, goal-oriented, they don't have a lot of patience to sit in that kind of misalignment between partners, and that's where we see, you know, companies that kind of are suffering from neglect in a sense, just because the partners can't align and do what needs to be done.
Well, usually they need to have prepared for that at the beginning, right? What happens when one of us wants to walk away prematurely? What happens to the stock, to the equity, to the control, right? Does that go back automatically to the founders? Is all of a sudden, these two founders
getting bought out? What
are in
valuation?
business now with with a spouse or whatever, right? Someone's son or like someone they didn't plan to. So I think if you have a partnership, you have to have all of that documented initially. What happens when one of us wants to leave early, or there's a disagreement? Is there arbitration? Is there having that preparation? Partnerships are complicated. People are complicated, and partnerships are complicated, right? I mean, obviously, multiple people together bring more relationships, more money, financial, more time to build a business, but they can also be fraught with a lot of potential, disaster if not planned properly.
In those sorts of teams,
Yeah.
it really helps to have a neutral third party who can listen to everyone and really validate everyone's perspectives, because inevitably, just like any partnership or relationship, you have your biases against whoever you're doing business with. He always does this, or she's going to be that way. I already know what she's going to say. I don't, And so having somebody who can pull it out as a fresh perspective and be like, you guys actually agree on so many things, and these are the points.
Find the common ground. Right?
Yeah, these are the points that we gotta get through, and we will. But
I find in most of those situations when I ask, what are the roles and responsibilities of you, they don't. They're all being founders, and they're all stepping on top of each other, right? And that's my domain, where I get the last word. Everyone gets to contribute, but that's my role and responsibility and contribution. They all step in, so then no one really has that ability to kind of perform, and so they get suppressed or back away. And the first thing I'm usually recommending is we've got to create roles and responsibilities so it's clear. Who is leading what part, what are you doing, where do you have the ability to contribute, and where do you have the ability to make the decision. You can't make the decision for everything all the time.
That makes succession planning possible.
yes,
You can't succeed if you don't have that.
yes. So that's
Yeah.
foundational, and I would 100% agree.
Yeah.
From an operational perspective and from avoiding some of the dysfunction. When it comes to succession planning, though, people are on different timelines. I mean, we're representing a client now,
Absolutely.
and one of their partner's spouses is very sick. His timeline for wanting to exit is different than the partner who wants to continue to work. And all of that's valid. And so creating a path that has integrity, that respects where partners are in their journeys without kind of the judgment of, hey, I thought we were both in this, now you want to leave, but the business exists, we created it. And if one of us is deciding to do something different, let's together create and fill in what we need to take your place, because the business is still going.
Custodians, right? Acting more like a custodian versus I own it, it's mine. Which again, you get too attached, too close, right? In many cases, to make great objective decisions or have objective conversations that don't get so emotional and so. Right, tangled. Just to recap kind of what we've talked about, create a vision for what does it look like afterward, which puts down those things that you've either wanted to do, feel like you've been missing out, create something to live into versus move out of, right? In terms of a vacuum, figure out where your strengths contribute to the company so you know how to replace yourself, and you know how to go profile and look for the ideal person to go do that. I would say those would be the first two that pop up for me, but anything else?
I think an easy way to start is, what am I annoyed about in running the business? What really bugs me, what don't, and that's a great and usually very rich starting place for understanding how you begin a transition. The transition can sound like such a scary word, but if you think about, okay, what do I actually really hate about running a business? That's a great place to begin. And then, potentially having these conversations with partners, if you have partners, earlier, or just checking in, not even about succession planning per se directly, but how are things going for you here? What do you like? What do you don't like? Let's have the conversation. let's, bring in this third party to kind of help us think through some of these things, because we just want to be really respectful of each other's goals and also what we've created.